What's cracking, big dogs? This is the first Bunkbed Breakdowns Q&A. We got them live from the Discord, live from the gutter. We only have about 4 to 5 questions this week. Hopefully, the ones in the future are going to be a little bit longer as you guys start to populate the channel a bit more. I'm not even sure if we have an intro for this segment. If we do, we'll hit it right now. All right, we're back from the intro. If we didn't have it, then there's probably just an awkward pause of me staring at the camera. But here are the questions. They will be flashed up on the screen for your guys' enjoyment. First up, we have Fempstead. I don't know what that means. He asks, which sophomore quarterback do you value highest coming into this year and why? I think, Mike, the obvious answer is Kyler Murray, but are there any other guys, whether it be Dwayne Haskins, whether it be Daniel Jones, that you are expecting a big jump from year one to year two in terms of fantasy value?
Daniel Jones has kind of already made that big jump, so I don't know how much higher he can go, but I do think there is some hope for Dwayne Haskins because everyone's basically written him off for dead. If you guys remember, like Dwayne Haskins was actually the consensus QB2 over Daniel Jones coming in, and I did not really expect him to do much in his first year because he was in a goddamn awful situation. But now he's got new coach, new scheme, another year of practice, and he did show like some bright spots towards the end of last year. Like I don't think Dwayne Haskins is a bust yet. I know people are trying to draw comparisons between him and Josh Rosen, but I don't really see that because one, like Washington did not draft a new quarterback, even though everyone thought they would. So they're obviously going with their guy. And two, like I do think there's a more volume and more fantasy assets in that team going forward between Antonio Gibson and Terry McLaurin. Obviously not a ton of weapons there, but I do think he's got a little bit to work with, and just another year of development. I think he can see a bump in value going forward.
Yeah, instead of them trying to replace him, they actually added, like you said, AGG, Antonio Gibson, Darius Geis is there. They have Terry McLaurin. They added pieces around him to help him develop instead of getting rid of him with a guy like Kyler Murray, who replaced a Josh Rosen very early in his career. Obviously, you can say Josh Rosen still has upside. Scott, I'm not there with you anymore. But what I will say is I also think a guy like Drew Lock, me personally, I'm not super high on him, but he's a guy whose value has spiked massively because they do bring in Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Albert Okwebunam. They bring in a ton of guys that can run really fast and sometimes catch footballs. He's somebody that I'm not super high on because what he showed us last year wasn't a whole lot. And I know people are going to say, oh, there was like a snow game in there. And what do you expect? He's a rookie. I don't know. I just think his price is a little bit too high. I haven't checked his updated ADP, but I know in May he was like the quarterback 15 off the board for Dynasty. For me, that's just a little bit too rich for my blood when I can get a guy like Ryan Tannehill, who we've seen be a very good fantasy producer, or Matthew Stafford a few rounds later. And we talked about it in this past week's bunk bed breakdowns that like sometimes being young isn't always the key to building a good dynasty roster. A guy like Ryan Tannehill, who's a bit older, was just signed to what I believe was either a 4-year deal or a 4-year extension. So although he's a little bit older, he does have the longevity play because he is under contract. We've seen him play. Drew Lock, what was he, like a second round pick? So although he is young and we hope he's going to produce, his leash isn't as long as somebody who's like just got paid $120 million like a Ryan Tannehill did. So as for Drew Lock, I'm not as high on him as you said with Daniel Jones. He's obviously probably going to take strides going from year one to year two, and even if he doesn't, what he did in year one showed me enough for him to be a valuable fantasy quarterback for you. Next up, we have BK Muchacho, Burger King Muchacho. He asks, who are your top 10 2021? What are your top 10 rookie 2021 class rankings for Superflex leagues? Mike, you're a little bit more well-versed than I am in this, so why don't you hit us with why Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback of all time?
Football Jesus, Trevor Lawrence. I mean, everyone knows about Trevor Lawrence. Came on as a freshman, won the national championship, went back last year, lost in the finals to the greatest college football team of all time, led by Joe Burrow. But again, just this guy he's hit nothing but net ever since he stepped on the field. He's going to be tested this year because he lost T. Higgins, and he was expecting to go into the year with Justin Ross, but obviously Justin Ross had that pre-existing condition, so which is pretty career-threatening. So, prayers out to him. Hopefully he recovers, but if not, I still have a lot of faith in Trevor Lawrence. This guy was one of the best high school prospects to come in. That's when I learned about him, when he was still a high schooler. And then, he obviously stepped on the stage and performed at the national level. So he's going to be pretty much the locked and loaded, like 1.01, unless like Honestly, he should just literally sit this entire season out because he has nothing else to prove. But next up behind him, I got Justin Fields. I freaking love Justin Fields. I've been standing for him again. I learned about him when he was still in high school, when he had committed to Georgia. And in true Georgia fashion, they somehow kicked him out the door for baby hands Jake Fromm. I will never understand it. It makes no sense to me. But thankfully, he landed at another great school in the Ohio State. And boy, did this cat fucking ball out this year. So that's my consensus 1.01, 1.02. Normally we do advise you to go running back, but I just feel like in next year, there really isn't that studly running back that I really, really want. So I'd much rather lock down these two quarterbacks. Next up, I also have Trey Lance. He put up some freaking ridiculous numbers as a college player. So he's from North Dakota State. So
That's where
obviously,
Carson Wentz is from, right?
yeah, exactly. So that's where Carson Wentz is from. So, a lot of people are attaching like that Carson Wentz name to him, but make no mistake, Trey Lance is a much better athlete than Carson Wentz was. And like he put up, what was it, like 28 touchdowns, no interceptions, 2,700 yards through the air, and a bunch of rushing yards on the ground. So he's got that dual threat quarterback uh, trait to him, take care of the ball. And so that kind of rounds out the top quarterbacks for me. And then I think for running backs, you obviously got Travis Etienne, as Nick said, puzzling for all of us why he went back, but probably for some elite head over at ACC, probably in the same room as Trevor Lawrence, football Jesus. But he's up there for me. And then I basically just jumped to the wide receivers because I think this is probably one of the best wide receiver classes at the top, at least. So I got my boy Rondale Moore, extremely exciting. Unfortunately, lost most of the season to an injury. And then, consensus 101, Jamar Chase freaking balled the fuck out with Joe Burrow. One of the greatest seasons we've seen from a wide receiver position. Then we got Rashad Bateman from Minnesota. Elite breakout, and he's basically the reason why Tyler Johnson got kicked to the curb by every single scout. And then behind him, obviously, assuming these guys all come out, I got my boy Seth Williams. And more recently, as I tweeted out before, I've basically turned my Twitter account into a De'Ami Brown Stan account. And if you don't know who De'Ami Brown is, search him up. Check out some of his film. He plays on North Carolina along with 2022's QB1 Sam Howell, and this dude is a fucking baller, and I love him. So that's kind of rounds out my top guys in terms of 2021 class.
Yeah, there aren't many other names I would add to that list. Mike obviously knows a lot more about them than I do. Obviously, a few other running backs like Chuba Hubbard and Najee Harris they both could have come out last year. They decided not to. Chuba Hubbard might be like transferring because of his disagreements with Mike Gundy. We'll see what happens with that. I'm pretty sure he can't enter the supplemental draft this year, so that would
Nope.
kind of stink for the kid. But as you said, right, like guys like Seth Williams, who may not be as big name guys, like watching that guy play for Auburn, I don't know. He's like fucking Kenny Galladay. The guy's just like big, athletic, got long arms, and he just catches everything. Bo Nix is just running around like a chicken with his head cut off, throws it up, and Seth Williams just hauls it down. So he's a guy I really like. Rashad Bateman is like a freak of nature. Jamar Chase, I'm sure everybody's seen that guy play. He's really good. It looks to be a really, really good wide receiver class again next year. I think we're getting a little bit spoiled, and that's why you should probably wait on the position a little bit in your startup drafts, just because there seems to be such a good crop of talent coming in, year out at the position.
Yeah. Oh, I guess one guy we left off is Najee Harris. Both Noah and I really like him. He's got the prototypical size, and he's going to get that Alabama draft capital premium. I doubt he falls past round 3 coming out just because like the class is pretty shallow. I mean, he's 225 pounds, 6'3", nimble as a fucking cat, and the dude's got mitts. So everything you want to see. And I think he's going to, I mean, assuming there's a college football season, which is really looking like it might not be the case. But assuming there is, I think he's really going to ball out because Tua's gone. So they're really going to lean on the run game and the identity of the Alabama Crimson Tide offensive line.
Yeah, and he was like the number one running back in his class coming out of high school. He's like one of the only high school like running backs I had ever really heard of prior to making it into college. Like he was just blowing up every mixtape, all those like Elite 11 type of stuff. Like he was out there. Actually, that might be like a quarterback camp, but whatever he was doing, whatever videos they're putting out on YouTube, the guy was absolutely dominant. So I love him too. Next up is more of a strategy question from Pija Rolls. I don't know what the fuck that means. He's asking, cornering the market on quarterbacks a viable strategy in Dynasty, and why? Mike, I know you love to basically take every quarterback from round 2 to 6, at least in the leagues that we've been in. For myself, I've been in a league where I ended with Tyrod Taylor as my quarterback 1, and that was kind of an ugly look for me. We talked about this a lot. I think cornering the quarterback market is smart in the sense that you'll be able to flip it for good value to those who weren't able to, who are at like the end of the run, who ended up with quarterbacks that they probably didn't want in the end, and they're ending up with like Tom Brady and Drew Brees, and they have no longevity at the position. But I also think that once you get into the point where positional players are huge values, like an Allen Robinson in the sixth, or like a Calvin Ridley in the sixth, something like that. I not that you should pass on the quarterback position, but I think the return that you're going to get on the quarterback in that round that you're picking is probably not going to always return you the value of the positional player that's going in that round. Like, for example, like a Drew Lock is going in round 6 and then Allen Robinson's round 6. I'm not so sure that you'd be able to flip a Drew Lock for Allen Robinson straight up unless the guy that has Allen Robinson has absolutely no quarterbacks.
Yeah. Look, the cornering the quarterback strategy that I wrote about in the draft guide is really based on value. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna just like punt on value and take a worse quarterback over a player. That's not really how it is. The reason why I say you can implement that strategy is because like if you're in an earlier draft with people that are new to Superflex, I find that they often undervalue the position. So you're getting great value at the quarterback position. That's why I draft like 5 or 6 of them, because I know I can trade them later. And you're always going to get like some people that are butthurt in the league, like, oh, I don't want to trade with you because because you corner the market or whatever. Like, fuck those guys. There's like other people in the market, and honestly, like if they want to like win eventually, like they're going to need to deal with you too. You just have to be patient. And usually cornering the quarterback most of the time means you're punting year one. But like a lot of strategies I've been implementing is like punting year one. I think that's just one where it's really effective. You got to really make sure you read the room though, because like there's like certain leagues where like they're not trade happy. So like if you're in a BDG league, like I wouldn't be too worried about it. We trade like crazy because that's like the name of the game. But if you're in like another league that you join, like maybe off Twitter or like a bunch of people you don't even know, I would be more careful. It has to be a trade happy league for it to work, because if no one's willing to trade with you, you're fucked. You're basically hanging on to those quarterbacks forever. So that's something to read, and also you really need to understand like the number of people in the league and like the setting, because if you have a 10-person league, you do not corner the quarterback, because one person is not enough to corner the quarterback position because there's just way too many of them. But if you're in a 12 league or even a 14 team league is ideal. Like that's where you really want to hammer it, because even like the guys that are later on, like the Cam Newtons and the James Winstons, when they had no jobs, as soon as they get a job, you're instantly getting a first. So like you really got to just understand your league and understand your league mates in order to make it work.
Yeah, and you said it before in like a really early episode on where you said like you invested heavily in Gardner Minshew last year because you saw him as a potential starting candidate for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And what I'll say is like it's obviously too late now, but a guy like Cam Newton, Jameis Winston, Andy Dalton, Jarrett Stidham, guys you could throw darts on in like round 10 plus a few months back. Obviously, Dalton and Stidham didn't work out for you, and maybe Jameis as well, even though he landed in a pretty good backup situation. Those low risk, high reward investments, like Mike was saying, you don't always have to corner the quarterback market in rounds 2 through 6, right? You can do that in the double digit rounds, passing up on wide receivers that are probably as boom bust as they come for a guy like Cam Newton, who could either not be on a roster or be the starting quarterback for the New England Patriots and get you 5 of those boom bust wide receivers in a trade later on. So there's always going to be value in the unknown, especially like in the double digit rounds with quarterbacks who you don't think are going to get a job. Maybe this year was kind of an anomaly with that because of COVID, but I'd be willing to bet that next year there's going to be some other guys that are looking to find jobs on the market. Maybe it's a Mitch Trubisky. Maybe somebody's dumb enough to pay him next offseason. He finds a job somewhere, and you can just automatically flip him to somebody who only has one starting quarterback. So that's my take on it. And we will move over to the final question. We were going to do a Chargers question, but I'm in too good of a mood to talk about them. This guy sent me a DM, so I'm not sure if like he wants his name out there, so I'll just keep it anonymous. He asks, why is Tyler Boyd so slept on? Even with AJ Green in the lineup, he already put up 1,000 yards, and he just got an upgrade at quarterback, and the whole offense can only improve from last year. I'll also add he did get extended this past year, so he's a guy that I'm pretty high on. He's still like 25, 26 years old, and he's put up back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Again, it's just like wide receiver is so deep that sometimes it's hard to justify putting him as like a top 20 option. Mike, I'm not sure where you have him in your rankings, but I think for me personally, he's like around that 30 mark, and that's not me disrespecting him. I just think that it's just like it's such a deep position that I feel like he just has to fall within that range.
Yeah, you have him at 26. I have him at 25. So look, I like Tyler Boyd too. I really like him. He's got a really elite college profile, and he performed, and he progressed throughout the normal course of like what you expect a wide receiver to do.
Not to
And
cut you
I
off,
like,
Mike, but like when you say he has an elite college profile, so many times it's like a crutch argument. But the fact that he has that profile and he, as you were saying, like went through the progression of like a guy with that college profile typically should and has done it back to back years proves to me that the college profile wasn't just like a myth or whatever. Like he actually went through each stage that he was supposed to go through and now has solidified himself as like a top one or two receiver on his own team.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I vision Tyler Boyd as a much younger Robert Woods, right? So Robert Woods right now is like 28 years old. Just imagine like a 25-year-old Robert Woods, and that's exactly what we go with Tyler Boyd. They both play very similar style. They can play out of the slot, but more so in that flanker role. They're probably both of them are not made to be like your prototypical wide receiver one from like an NFL standpoint, but that doesn't mean that he can't produce like wide receiver two, high wide receiver two, low wide receiver one numbers from a fantasy perspective, especially with Joe Burrow there. We saw how much Joe Burrow fed Justin Jefferson. So we kind of know, that those targets are likely going Tyler Boyd, who is really good. And I actually really like Tyler Boyd. I have him on a lot of my teams, and he's definitely someone that I'm willing to acquire more of. And one of the most common moves you can do is just find people that are more expensive than Boyd and try and trade down and get like a future pick. Like if you can get Tyler Boyd plus like a 2021 first or 2022 first for someone like Kenny Galladay, like you should be smashing that like 20 times out of 20.
Yeah, he's just boring, right? He's the guy who's gonna catch you 90 passes for 1,000 yards and 5 to 6 touchdowns, and that's nothing exciting. But at the end of the year, when he's the wide receiver 17 on the back of those numbers, maybe even higher with a guy like Joe Burrow under center, who is much better than Andy Dalton, Jeff Driscoll, Ryan Finley, whatever redheaded guy they put behind center in the past cannot touch what Joe Burrow is going to do this season. They do bring in T Higgins, but as the guy said in the question, like when AJ Green was there last, I think it was 2 years ago, right in 2018, like he was the wide receiver 12 over that span while AJ Green was like a top 8 guy. So we've seen him produce when other people are on the field also putting up numbers. So there's no concern there. Zach Taylor showed what he wanted to do with Cooper Kupp in that big slot in the past. Now he has Tyler Boyd to play with, and he's shown that he wants to get him heavily involved in that offense, which he did this past season. And I think that wraps up our first Bunk Bed Breakdowns Q&A session. We'll hopefully get one out to you guys again this Tuesday and probably a bi-weekly segment because there aren't a ton of questions pouring in. And if that changes, maybe we'll make it a weekly segment. We'll see what you guys say. We'll see the feedback. And hopefully we're going to be very consistent on this channel with like 5 videos a week. So if you do enjoy this type of content, please leave a thumbs up. Subscribe if you are new and stay tuned for what Mike has in store this Monday. Peace.